Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Lindsay, also known as Animal-Based Faye, and I'm an exciting guest here today. This is Dan from NADS Underwear.
Hello, hello.
That's
Pumped
right.
to be here.
Yes, this is a little bit different from my content. Everybody typically sees me, cooking in the kitchen or on farms with cows and all of that. But part of this channel is really meant to just take a deeper dive into holistic health. And so I'm a big fan of how we can just be healthier, not only by what we consume, like eating wise, but also what we consume and maybe absorb through our body. And so let's talk a little bit about what NADS is.
Sure. So NADS was founded to be a men's underwear brand with sustainable health first principles, right? My business partner and I, Steve, we go way back from a friendship perspective, and then we kind of both have an affinity towards health and wellness. It took the lens of fitness for a long time, and then eventually it turned into kind of just human optimization and making sure that everything that we did, whether it was be consumables or wearables, things around the house, were free of some of these toxins and chemicals that have been known to be anti-health and specific to men's health, right? And then overall health as well, of course. For our lens, we wanted to try and bring a pair of underwear to market that was free of those toxins and chemicals linked directly to infertility, other reproductive issues, things like decreased testosterone, azoospermia, a host of other issues that men shouldn't be having to deal with, and that most men are unaware are actually present in things that they're wearing, specifically in their underwear. So we're trying to take that off of the table of risk areas for environmental toxin exposure.
Yeah, and it shows, in the statistics too, that, infertility is up. So any way that we can decrease, the toxic load is just super helpful when it comes to fertility or, erectile dysfunction or all these problems that we don't need or that don't need to exist, without making maybe some minor positive habits. So yeah, and one reason why I really love just collaborating or partnering with someone like NADS, or just really just promoting a brand such as NADS, is because you guys are very thorough, you're meticulous, you are just at every step of the way in every process. We've had conversations before this and for a long time too, just in regards to what we're wearing, what we're putting in our body, how we're consuming it from, again, food as well as from a clothing aspect to it. And so I really like to chat and have these conversations with you guys that because it's kind of my standards, right? High quality standards. It's like if I go through this process in my brain of, trying to source quality underwear or boxers. I have their boxers in Ball Natural, and also in black too, and I love them. So ladies, they're really great for nighttime and just like casual lounging around the house, which I use absolutely, even though this is more geared towards men. I love to wear boxers, and I'm sure you guys do too. So, and if ladies you're watching, also get them for your guys. It's a really awesome present. But anyways, and so I love to just talk to you guys through and through, because it's all about, your history and why you started. And, you mentioned that you were into fitness and workout, and you still are, which is also something that I admire, is we're still walking the walk, right? And I think that that is one of my passions and one of my core values, is that I always want to be walking the walk. And I also want others, to be in this ecosystem to also help me walk the walk and to, be supportive. And so you're one of those that helps support this message of being healthy and just being intentional about our choices. So do you want to talk a little bit about, how NADS sort of
the story?
The story.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for that positivity and for just the partnership in general so far. We've been very fortunate and grateful to have this awesome alliance so far. So we're pumped about that. But the NADS story, so I've told this story in a handful of different ways, and I think the best, most consolidated way for me to do this, to not talk for multiple hours, is going to be, I kind of prefaced it with saying, I had the affinity towards health and wellness for a long time, and it kind of started with athletics and sports at a young age, and it kind of always took that shape. And then as I started to get a little bit older, I started to look at what was really going on underneath the surface. So when I was 21 years old, I had a little bit of a freak accident I was in Italy, and I did a belly flop into a shallow pool, and I hit my head in the bottom of the pool.
Oh my gosh.
I fractured my C4 vertebrae.
Okay.
And I still have use of my hands. I wasn't paralyzed, thank God. Everything was okay. But what happened was I had a host of imbalances due to that injury in my traps, down into my rhomboids, and then into my lower back. So it caused just like a mountain range of knots.
Okay.
So from that point forward, I was in, it was around 2017 at the time. I was in a pretty good amount of pain in my body. And I was struggling because I had such a big piece of my identity tied into fitness and into health and wellness, but really just fitness at the time. And so I had all this pain, I was trying to mitigate the pain. And one thing led to another. Eventually, I started really trying to figure out what was going on under the surface. So this whole thing started out from a lens of me trying to reduce inflammation, right? So this was way back when. So I dove down to the rabbit hole. I figured out at the time what was going on underneath was that my inflammation was through the roof. I actually had low testosterone at around age 21 to 23, which I thought was funky. I was like, okay, well, what gives if I'm in decent enough shape? My quality of life is solid. How could I have low testosterone? So I started learning more and more. Kind of Pandora's box was opened. Obviously, it's just like kept going and going. And eventually, I started realizing there are things in my life that are exposing me to toxins and chemicals that are having this negative impact on what's going on underneath the surface. Things that maybe in the past I would have said, no, that's not going to do anything for me. So I started making switches, things like deodorants, cookware. Obviously nutrition was the first step, right? I often overlooked that because it's just kind of such a cornerstone, but making the switch to organic produce, to pastured poultry, to grass-fed beef, to just improving the overall quality of the foods that I was eating. That was the first step. And then it took the shape of, deodorants and soaps and cookware, food storage. I got rid of a lot of things around the house that I didn't realize could actually be leaching chemicals, and things like PFAs, perfluorochemicals, phthalates into the air, things that can be ingested through skin contact, through inhalation, and through ingestion. So I started to try and figure out all of these different things that might be causing negative repercussions in the body, specifically with hormone health. So I learned that kind of at the crutch, or the crux of health is the hormonal balance. And everything kind of plays around it, right? So I set on a mission to optimize my testosterone production. Everything that I just mentioned in terms of swaps happened, and things started to trend up. I started to prioritize things like recovery, sleep, mitigating toxin exposure, as I mentioned, and then about a year and a half ago or so, I was looking down at my shorts while I was in the sauna, and I'm wearing 100% polyester compression shorts. I'm just sitting there, I'm thinking, what are those made of? It's like, how are those produced?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I switched my bedding a while ago
Yeah.
to organic cotton bed sheets. I have an organic duvet and an organic duvet cover.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. But I didn't really think about clothing at all,
Yeah.
especially clothing that sits that close to my nether parts, which are where obviously testosterone is produced in the gonads.
Yes.
So I start the wheels turning there, and I
And your
hop
pores
online.
are open, sweating in the
Yeah,
sauna.
right?
It's like
I'm in
welcoming.
200-degree room for 30 minutes, a couple times a week. In the polyester, it's not ideal, right?
230, that's intense.
No,
That's a good
200.
sauna session.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
so I kind of started looking for options for myself as a consumer, and I couldn't really find them. I couldn't find a pair of organic cotton underwear that was conducive to rigorous training and then just the everyday hustle and bustle of life. So I kind of just thought, hey, why don't we make it?
Yeah.
Right? After about a week or two of research, we couldn't find a solid option. I called my co-founder, Steve, and I said, hey, I got this idea for this thing. What do you think? We kind of went back and forth a little bit, and nothing really happened. And I kind of thought at the time that maybe there was going to be some social media marketing that targeted me.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, the solution is going to find me.
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
It's 2022. Hopefully that happens, and it didn't. So
Yeah.
I thought, okay, maybe there's a hole in the market.
Yeah.
So I've always known that I wanted to be in my own entrepreneurial venture, and I always knew that it was going to be aligned with health and wellness in some capacity. And so I thought this was the perfect opportunity, and I thought that the market needed it. And I thought if I have this issue and I'm considering making this switch, then other men can also be looking to make this switch. But even more important than that was the ability to be a voice of education, to let them know that, hey, this might be going on. And although organic underwear is not going to solve all the problems,
Right.
it's just one of those things where if you're pulling a host of levers in your life to improve your health, this is one where you can actually now pull it.
Yeah.
Right? You have access to this clean, non-toxic, organic cotton undergarment, which is the first line of defense to your boys. And then, of course, from a branding and marketing perspective, we wanted to do something memorable, something a little catchy.
Of course.
So we went with NADS. Right?
Yeah.
Organic underwear designed for healthier NADS.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the crash course of the story.
Yeah. Crazy, right? Oh my gosh, I always get worried about, because I'm such a physical person too, that if I were to be in a skiing accident or something, like just, doing things, I do, some adrenaline like sports, and so they're a little bit riskier. And so I always wonder, like, what would happen if, I don't know, maybe got paralyzed or something, not to be like a downer, but like that's a real thing. Like, where would my brain go? And so I'm really grateful for, conversations like these to just like find different outlets of how we can really just extract more from life from like a less toxic perspective too. And this is why I do what I do too, and just very intentional about my choices. And this isn't really meant to be like fear-based, fear everything. Like, everything is plastic, so it is pretty scary, but like also like don't fear it. It's just like if we can choose, if we know, we have the knowledge, we have the power, and we know that this is polyester and plastic, and this could cause, low T for even women too as well. Or choose organic, cotton, natural fibers, then why don't we choose that? And the things that we have to deal with, other plastics that surround us, then that's okay. It's this whole accumulation of all of these things, right? And so just knowledge is power. So if you have this information, you get to choose, and that's all I want, right? And if you choose polyester still, great, like that's good. At least you know. Right. So anyway, so these are just sort of important decisions along the way. And again, I just feel like, knowing more doesn't scare me, or if it does cause me mental distress, then I won't think about that anymore. Like, there's a balance there, but knowing these things to sort of just like increase my daily, like, just making each day count, really, or at least I try. So that's a really cool story of, just turning in something that could have been maybe a downer into,
it kind of led me
a
to
launch
an
pad.
Interesting opportunity.
Yeah.
I don't think I would be nearly as in touch with health and wellness to the degree that I am now if that hadn't happened.
Yeah.
And I don't know what my life would have looked like. But I'm really glad that did happen, because it opened my eyes to a lot of things. And it led me to this. And this is proving to be an interesting thing to be able to help other people, right? Mm-hmm. And to, like you said, just to give people an option.
Yeah.
And then it's on them if they want to make an educated choice.
Right.
Great.
Yeah.
But this is out there now. And
have you tested your T levels now?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I was younger, it was like sub 4. I was like 350 at one point, the lowest point. And now I'm 675 north consistently, and it's typically not what's supposed to happen as you get older.
Yeah, right? Sure.
So it's like, okay, well, what gives? And it was like, okay, all these swaps and all these different lifestyle changes definitely had an impact on that. And then the good news around that was, in optimizing for T production, everything else got better, right?
Yeah, right.
So like all of those other key biomarkers started to follow suit, and just quality of life got better, energy got better, brain fog went away, fatigue went away. But the most important thing is that the inflammation in my back, totally gone.
Oh my gosh, really?
So the inflammation mitigation from this whole journey of optimization has been the biggest thing. Right? Because that level of pain and discomfort I was in early on was tough.
Right.
I spent a lot of money on things like acupuncture, massages, all of the gadgets for the house to try and work out the knots in my back, and I didn't realize that it was just all because of inflammation.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's insane. But I like what you say about journey of optimization, because it really is a journey. And so, diving into more of the clothing aspect too. I mean, I'm still not even happy about what's out there for women's clothing, for like underwears and bras. I know I get so many DMs too about people asking me like, well, what's a good, underwear brand for women, or workout clothes or bra. And though I have some pieces from different places, I still, like, after 2 years of just diving into this, I'm just still like running into issues here. So, which of course like made me think of like wanting to develop like a women's clothing line, which I don't know, maybe we could start with underwear or something. But
stay tuned this year for more.
Yeah, exactly, maybe. But either way, so the journey of optimization is just something that's like a really cool thing to just always think about, because again, as we dive into things like this that seem like advanced little detail that might cause you like more mental distress, we don't want that. It's just, if I'm looking at somebody who essentially is like, oh shoot, I have a whole closet full of polyester, what do you tell them? Like, where do you tell them to start, really, I guess, for beginners who are wanting to live a more toxic-free lifestyle from a clothing perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's one of those things where it can be a little intimidating trying to switch out everything at once, right? So in my personal journey, it was a step-by-step process. Learned about deodorant, learned about soap, learned about cleaning supplies around the house, learned about things like candles.
Yeah.
And it just kind of kept going. And once you start to pick up some speed, the dominoes are falling, and then eventually you have like the culmination of all these parts that are now swapped out for better living supplies, we'll call them. But in the world of clothing, most people's wardrobes are built around things that have been so normalized in apparel production that it probably would be a little bit overwhelming to look at it and be like, I have to switch everything out.
Right.
And it would be expensive.
Yeah.
Right. So the way that we look at it is that your base layer matters most, right? Because if you're wearing clothing that's touching your skin around the clock, that's going to be the most important thing, right? So the underwear that you're wearing is obviously the closest fabric to your sensitive parts.
And your most porous, spots,
exactly.
for sure. Yeah.
So we always say start with the underwear and then move out from there. I would say that workout apparel is just as important, because when you're sweating like that, the moisture doesn't actually have anywhere to go. So although fabrics like polyester, spandex, and rayon have been marketed as moisture wicking, what actually happens is the moisture can't pass through them. So it actually just runs down, so they don't carry the moisture. So when people wear cotton garments, they're like, well, it gets so heavy, it gets wet. It's because it actually allows breathability and the moisture to pass through the garment. So it actually is better for your skin, and then therefore these undergarments are way less likely to take part in leading to things like UTIs, yeast infections, and all of these other things that are nasty with the skin.
Yeah,
right? It's because of that impermeability of the actual fabric itself.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So we would always say switch out the base layer first.
Yeah.
And then move on from there. You're gonna be a little bit less likely to have skin contact with, a jacket that's made from polyester or one of these other materials.
Right.
If you're wearing a shirt underneath it, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
Which is why, I'm a skier, and so though I'm on my quest to just like completely get rid of like all of the clothing that contains any polyester, some of those jackets, it's just like that's impossible. And so those are one of the, well, I don't want to say impossible because nothing is impossible, but those are one of those things where it's like, okay, that's kind of a necessity to have in that, in that sort of sport or, certain things, but it is like my third layer. So I'm definitely wearing merino wool as a base layer underneath that. And so I even have still, from a winter clothing perspective too, there's very few items that are polyester, or even like a dress perspective. That's really hard for functionality, to find, cute dresses. So those ones are still in my closet right now, and I'm still on that journey to optimizing my closet, though I know, I have the education and understanding what it is doing when I do put it on, which is fine, but I don't wear that as frequent, where it's like undergarments too. It's like the frequency of use as well. So it's not even just what's touching your skin right away. It's just like you're also using it every single day. So that is something that is like accumulating
you're not
over
doomed
time.
if you wear these things from time to time at the end of the day. It's about trying to make the choices that, for majority of the time, are going to have a longer lasting impact. Right. Because if you try and do everything all the time, you're going to end up with probably causing more harm than good with the stress that you'll cause just trying to abide by those rules. So I think one of the principles that we have with NADS and the way that we kind of live our lives has been, we have guidelines rather than rules.
Yeah.
And we try and follow them 80 to 95% of the time.
Yeah.
And then there are some times where, it's kind of out of your control.
Right.
We can't stress about those times as much.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So what exactly, so when you put plastic on your body, like from a, health perspective, what is happening?
So what can happen, what we found with clothing, there's a ton of studies that have been carried out demonstrating that we can actually absorb the chemicals that are in the fabrics themselves right through skin contact, right? So like one of those questions people were asking us early on was, Well, we understand that with deodorant it makes sense because you're putting it right on your skin. It's like, well, you're also putting your clothing right on your skin, right? So if this has chemicals, if it's acting like a reservoir for chemicals, then you can absorb those right through the skin as well. So the thought is that things in plastic-based fibers like BPA, PFAs, perfluorochemicals, phthalates, forever chemicals, they can linger in the clothing themselves, and they can actually then be absorbed into the body, and then once they're in the bloodstream, that's when you run the risk of having the negative health implications that come with it.
Right. This is forever chemicals.
Yeah.
Okay, like this stays in your system, causing hormonal disruption and causing a lot, like wreaking havoc on just hormones and pathways and all these things that could just miscommunicate and cause inflammation. And yeah, so what other health outcomes could it potentially be causing?
So there's a host of things that forever chemicals and these man-made compounds have been connected to, and there's a ton of studies that we actually have listed on our website as well in the references section.
Yeah,
but
you could check the link down below too to just like hop on their website and see all these studies.
Yeah, exactly. And then we focus really on the reproductive side of things, being in the underwear space. So things like infertility, erectile dysfunction, azoospermia, which is where there's actually no living sperm in a male ejaculate. So that's actually, there's been studies on polyester directly where that's been the outcome, which we've talked about in the past. But and then things like increased estrogen levels, because a lot of these plastic-based chemicals are going to mimic estrogen in the body. So there's xenoestrogens, which means that your estrogen is going to spike, and in turn your testosterone is likely going to go down, and it can cause kind of a host of hormonal imbalances, which can then spiral into other issues. But they've been linked to other things like kidney disease, liver disease, cardiovascular effects, kind of everything. And then also one of the ones that was interesting with me is the neurological damage that it can cause over time.
Yeah.
Things like brain fog and fatigue and inability to have just normal levels of cognition, right? So that's one of those things. And you know, forever chemicals, it's because they don't break down over time on their own.
Yeah.
The good news is that not necessarily will they be forever in your body, but from a breakdown perspective, they're not 20-minute chemicals, they're not 40-minute chemicals.
Right.
Like, they're forever chemicals.
Yeah.
They're man-made, and they're not friendly.
Yeah.
Right.
And could cause like permanent consequences too.
Yeah.
You know, so it's crazy. And what's really interesting too is that, you know, similarly to how, you know, when you dial in your diet, right? I also come from a sports background at the age of 5, martial artist and gymnast, and so I grew up always just focusing around fueling for performance, right? So, however, you know, the more advanced details didn't come till later, till I was diagnosed with celiac disease, which is a whole nother story. But essentially, my journey to optimizing in nutrition led to a lot of these things and questioning, okay, like all of my surroundings, everything I'm consuming, from, you know, TV to electronics to clothes to all of these things, right? And so once, you know, I find there's a lot of addition by subtraction in ways.
Right.
And so it's like adding to your life by simplifying is really the essence, or just kind of like my motto, really. And so once I got rid of a lot of things, so then when I did address the issue of, well, what are we wearing, and, you know, from a health perspective too, and how is that affecting us, I then obviously started to change my wardrobe. And once I did start to wear natural fibers and things like that, it's not like you, oh my gosh, like I'm just this holy person now and I just like feel incredible and blah blah blah, like that's not, yeah, like radiating. It's not always the case. But it wasn't until I put polyester like back on when winter came around, where I was just like, okay, I need to put on, you know, this sweater or something, I'll deal with it. It felt so weird on my skin.
Yeah.
Like it was just weird. And so, like I said, similar to how food is like, I mean, I have less foods that I eat in my diet, because the more complicated, I guess, it seems to get, it's just the more I feel like there are undesirable outcomes that happen, whether it be, you know, bloating, or it just doesn't make me feel as good as I can feel. And so when I'm wearing natural fibers, and then that one, you know, a few times that I've switched to polyester just kind of during winter, it's just like I get this off of my skin. And so before, I didn't feel like I needed to crawl out of my sweater And it's
like
weird.
Your baseline was at a different level at that point.
Yeah, or maybe it's just like when the natural fibers feel good, and even like, this might be crazy, but like even the energy too for me is just like, whether it is placebo that it's like I'm wearing natural fibers, or like actually like the energy that surrounds that, like just wearing these natural fibers, I guess I just feel more connected to myself, to the world, honestly, and just to like being intentional with my choices. And so it could be that sort of energy, or it could be actually just the fact that it is natural and it's not plastic.
I think that's real, and that's an interesting thing you bring up. So these plastic-based fibers in such heavy abundance, like 100%, 60%, they actually generate some sort of electrostatic charge between the fabric and your skin. So in that study I referenced earlier, these men wore a polyester scrotum sling, which is essentially just a cup, pretty much just polyester underwear compressed around the balls. And after about, I think it was 180 days, all of these men, I think there was 16 in the study, became azospermic. And it wasn't because they were leaching chemicals and microplastics into the skin per se. I'm sure that had an impact on it, but it was because there was an actual electrostatic charge generated between the skin and the actual fabric. And it doesn't happen with organic natural fibers, right? So it essentially electrocuted them down there.
Right.
Luckily, once they removed it,
Yeah.
they returned back to baseline. All these guys went on to have children with their spouses.
Yeah.
But that's an alarming thing. And then there's also been a lot of studies that have come out that have said the frequency of the fabrics we wear actually matters. And I don't fact check me on this one, but there was something that came out recently that said that polyester has the same frequency of a dead person.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, okay, I don't know about this one, but like the fact that that's even being brought up as a potential talking point is something where it's like, okay, let's ask the questions about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. And the other thing that I've noticed is, I don't do this much anymore, but during kind of that initial phase out period from wearing polyester based workout clothing to the gym, is that my skin would break out so much.
Yeah.
I would have acne all over my chest and back, strictly from wearing those fabrics on my upper layer here, and then sweating and not being able to have the sweat actually pass through.
Yeah.
So that was another thing, was like, okay, I actually feel kind of just gross when I'm wearing it.
Sure.
And I think that was kind of a combination of things, but the frequency is an interesting thing that we're starting to see more and more literature come out on.
Oh yeah. It's a real thing.
I think it's real.
Yeah. I think so, and especially when you remove it for so long. I mean, it's like anything else too, where I mean, years and years ago, I got rid of like perfume and like any of those like smelly things, or, you know, and then it's like, then it leads to like, oh, you know, diffusers and candles and like all these things that you don't think of. And then the minute that, like, you know, even my neighbor next door is like doing laundry and I can just smell it in the air, I'm like, oh my gosh. So it's like, again, once you eliminate all of these things, and then it kind of like gets introduced a little bit, you can just feel the difference. And so that's kind of what's scary, is like you're on this toxic overload sometimes that you don't even notice it in your daily. You don't notice how good you can feel until you have made that switch or transition. So again, it might be easiest, obviously, just to start somewhere simple. I mean, I'm kind of talking a little bit of switching like my winter wardrobe, hopefully for next season, next year, but it's a process, a journey to optimization, that's for sure.
Interesting you bring that up. I walked through the mall in South Florida where I live pretty recently. I was in there for maybe 15 minutes, and I came out and had a raging headache.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I was like, I'm in the endocrine disrupting wonderland.
Yeah.
I walked out and I was like, oh man, I actually feel this.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is very, very real.
Yeah.
Right, you're just in there, just breathing it in. There's people like, do you want to smell this perfume? And it's cologne. I'm like, no, get away from me.
I get immediate headaches right away, and you're like, wow, like this is awesome, where, you know, it almost feels like normal to have headaches sometimes. Like, you know, I remember like years ago where it's just like, yeah, this is just kind of what happens. But what if it's not, you know? And this isn't for anybody to be afraid to, like, you know, walk into the mall or go to these places. Like, we have to live. We can't live in a bubble either. But like, it's just incredible to really like turn up the volume of intuitive nourishment from all perspectives, from food, from you know, what you're consuming on your body and all these things. And so you do that by making kind of these small steps and these small changes towards holistic health, really. So okay, so we talked about plastics, on our body and how it harms our health, potential health effects, but also environmentally speaking too. And I actually didn't know this until just recently, that when we wash our clothes, and we're washing our clothes a lot, and we're washing plastic clothes, that gets into our water systems. And so you're drinking that. Well, hopefully not. Hopefully you've had filtered water because I promote that. So if you guys are following me, then you should know that I absolutely despise plastic water bottles, as well as just tap water in general. Anyways, so it gets into our water systems, and therefore we have to filter out our water to filter out, the microplastics and all of these things, harmful chemicals. So it's crazy because it also participates in this just vicious cycle, and stuff that, once again, also harms our health indirectly too, just by washing clothes. And also, just going off of that topic too, there is a little some sort of mesh bag that I didn't even realize too, that you can do to contain your polyester or plastic, or we'll talk about the fibers too, or the fabrics that are sort of kind of not something that we would wear, but there's this pocket mesh thing, not mesh. I think it actually has a little bit
screen,
more. Yeah,
right?
Where it holds in the plastics actually, and it doesn't get into. So that's also could be an option too. I haven't really looked into that, but just throwing that out there. But it still affects your clothes and whatnot. But so from an environmental standpoint, how does that make you guys feel?
So it's interesting. That's a big concern, and sustainability is a huge part of the business, and we don't market it as much, but it's kind of just one of those things where it's such a nice side effect of what we do. So we're so for health, and in doing that, we're also very for earth.
Yeah.
Right? So the good news is that with organic cotton fibers, if they're not based in plastic, well, then you're not going to have the issue of microplastic leaching out into their surroundings, including your skin or including your water when you're washing your clothing. And then when it gets pulled back out of the machine, it's going back into the water supply,
right,
and such and so forth, right? So the microplastic issue in the environment and in the body is so prevalent that it's almost where is it not coming from, right? So it's in the water supply, that's definitely for sure. We know that. I think there's a lot of buzz right now saying human beings will actually absorb about a credit card's worth of plastic in a week.
Yeah.
Right? So we're just adding a quick Visa to the lunch menu,
yeah.
literally just eating it once a week.
Humans are becoming plastic. Trying to avoid it.
But getting into the water supply through laundering clothing is a real issue. The good news is that with organic fabrics, we're not running that risk exposure nearly as much. And then the thought as well is that in the production of these fabrics, we don't have nearly as much of a chemically intensive process. So it's much better not only for the earth, but for the workers involved as well.
Yeah.
So trying to be pro-earth in every area of our business, which is why we use recycled and recyclable mailers. And we also have plastic-free packaging. So we're trying to do that across the board, and just take those steps, and just knowing that, hey, we're trying to do our part. But I think it's an interesting thing that there's going to be more and more literature coming out around the actual laundry side of things. The good news with that is that anytime there is an issue like that, there are innovators who come out with cool solutions, right?
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to seeing what else comes out, like this screen bag you're talking about. I actually hadn't heard of that until now.
Yeah. I should share it with you. I was looking for just for mesh bags for my own laundry purposes, and just kind of keeping more gentle cycle items in that too as well. So so then as we're talking about just the whole picture and holistic, and these are the kind of people that I want to support, and the more I move forward in this world, not only do I want to be intentional about just my choices and what I'm consuming, but I also want to be intentional about who I support. And so really love that you have a health background, you and your partners as well too, and then just how you always have that kind of come back to your launch pad of what you believe in from different spokes and different angles, which is just holistic health from environmental standpoint to human health, and then to workers and to packaging and to all these advanced details, which I really love, and really, really admire and appreciate in companies like yourselves.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And so with that being said, we have to be mindful each step of the way. And I know that it's easy, again, talking about transitioning your closet, that we talked about it from a mental standpoint, how it can be, overwhelming, but also let's talk about the finances too. From a financial standpoint, it can absolutely be overwhelming. But what I do love about the transition is not only am I intentional about every piece of clothing, because it does come at a higher cost, and for, good reason, because not only is the company being intentional, but also just, it's not cheap. Plastic is cheap.
Right.
And so if you want cheap, and if you want cheap health too, like that's sort of the path that you may go on. But when I did start choosing natural fibers and changing out my closet, every piece is intentional, so there's more meaning behind it too. But also my closet shrank, like, simple, again, addition by subtraction, like living and embracing a little bit more of a simple life, and less is more sort of mentality is really like, it's a part of health too, just like everything. So let's talk about what that means as far as from a NADS perspective and sourcing perspective and costs.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we get some pushback on is cost of garments to the market, right? So our underwear is between $32 to $34 a pair if you buy them in singles, but luckily we offer them in bundles, so they go down all the way down to around 27 or so and change for a pair if you're going to buy them up into an 8-pack. So we try to make it more affordable that way. Being a new small business presents challenges. We don't have economies of scale to where we can order millions of units and get our costs exponentially lower to then pass in a lower cost to the market. So it's presented some challenges. If you assess the actual underwear market, so this is where there's a lot of misconceptions here, is that we're actually a mid-market priced underwear. So there are companies out there, some of the bigger players who are built around synthetics, who have underwear that is all the way from $40 up to $78 per pair.
Yeah.
That's kind of insane.
Yeah. It is.
Especially when
scrap plastic.
Yeah, like the thing is that with a slightly higher price point underwear being in that mid-market sweet spot, we're not selling an $8 pair of underwear, which comes with a cheap price tag, but a cheap product and cheap workmanship, and it's going to fall apart. Like I mentioned earlier, we wanted to build underwear that was actually able to hand up to a rigorous training and active lifestyle, right? So that was super important to us to make sure that I actually could withstand that, and that meant a little bit of some extra legwork on production and in fabric quality and material and trim and everything, right? So with that does come a higher cost. Manufacturing cost is higher because we can't take some of these shortcuts that the big name manufacturers can take with material and manufacturing and the entire process. We do have a higher cost of goods, which means that we have to sell them for a slightly higher price than most people might expect underwear to be costing. That said, what's very pro-consumer is that our underwear should last a long time. I've been wearing our original prototype NADS underwear for well over a year now, and I don't think I'll ever need to replace my underwear drawer again because it's going to hold up. I will for sanity purposes, and just because I will as we develop more styles and colors. But
which
the good
you can't
news,
say about your synthetic underwears, because I know how many repurchases,
right?
Which essentially then cost you more in the end.
You want to buy something that's $10 10 times, or do you want to buy something that's $30 maybe 2 times?
Totally.
Right? So it's going to last a lot longer because we opted for certified organic, high-end, premium Turkish organic cotton, right? So we wanted to make sure that we didn't take any shortcuts on that front. And the good news with that is that it's very pro-labor with the GOTS certification for our suppliers, factory and manufacturing facilities in Turkey. They're very responsible with how everything's made from cottonseed all the way to finished garment, and that means that the entire supply chain is buttoned up, and that does come with a higher price.
Right.
But it should last longer.
Right.
And then, like you said, every single purchase you make is intentional, and you shouldn't need 30 pairs of underwear if you've got 8 to 10 really solid ones.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way we look at it.
And the support goes, along their chain, right? And so it goes to the origin too, as well as in Turkey. And I know there's a lot of clothing out there that also comes from China too. So it's like, again, it's just another advanced detail and intentionality where it's like, where do you want to support, and just to know that you have that choice, which is amazing. So where can we find you then? Where
Yeah.
else can we find
So
you?
we right now are 100% direct to consumer online through our own website. We are at
Great.
nadsunder.com. NADS, N-A-D-S, under, short for underwear.com. And our Instagram is also nadsunder. And we post on there health tips and tricks. We post educational content around the issue at hand. And then we post just some funny, cool stuff, right? Just trying to keep things light and engaging at the end of the day. But nadsunder.com is our store. We have a couple styles and we're looking to expand this year. So keep an eye out there to see where we hopefully get into.
Can you reveal anything for us, or?
Not yet, but we'll get there soon. But yeah, we'll look to expand into a couple of different avenues, potentially into a ladies' market if the wins end up at our sales with that, and we'll see where that takes us. But for now, we are doing men's underwear.
I'll be like, we need it.
Yeah, exactly.
We need it, because I'm 2 years into this and I'm still struggling. So looking forward to it.
Like we said before, with every problem, there's always an opportunity for a solution, right? So we'll see if we're going to put that solution in place.
I agree. Cool. Yeah. Well, it was wonderful having you, and thanks
you.
for your story. This is the kind of the first time that I heard a little bit more in detail too. So excited to have you, and yeah, just look out for them on Instagram. Of course, I share them as well too, so you'll be able to just keep on with my Instagram and be in the know. And all the links are down below. So thank you for joining. My name is Lindsay, also known as Animal Base Bay, and I am here with Dan from NADS. We had a beautiful, wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much.
About, thank you so much. See you next time.